So, I've decided to make a graphic novel, as in it hasn't been made yet, and is very much a work in progress. But that's not the point. I'm here to give you the boost of confidence you may or may not need to start your own. Now, I am by no means a professional and have zero experience, barring some sketchbook comic strips and a few school projects. I'm still a beginner in every regard, so I really have no business talking about how to create a graphic novel. There are already a ton of really great resources out there to explain that. Rather, this is going to be a loose collection of information I've gathered and progress I've made on my own journey thus far. Some beginner's advice from a beginner. Also, I'm going to be using graphic novel as a catch-all term, including comic periodicals, webcomics, and other sequential art-based storytelling mediums. Now, making a graphic novel is something I've dreamed about for years, but never really thought I'd be able to make a reality. It was always something that I wouldn't have the time for, something I lacked the skills for, and something nobody would really care about but me. There have been many a project I've abandoned because I was worried they'd be taken as too cliché or too cringy. Granted, most of them were. My stupid Wattpad stories from like the 6th grade prove that. But the point is, I let it undermine my own enjoyment, and as a result, I lost sight of my original passion that led me to creating said work in the first place. So, there it is. Passion. Although the creative process is by no means a set formula, and everyone goes about it a different way, one universal piece of advice I've learned from nearly every creator I've stumbled across is that whatever it is you want to make, it should be something that you're passionate about. This is something I'm sure everyone's heard before, but there's a reason this piece of advice is so ubiquitous. When it comes to undertaking a graphic novel, or nearly any project really, starting off with an idea that you're excited about is going to get you the most invested. Building off of this core idea should hopefully make it easier to maintain motivation over the course of the project. Personally, I tend to start with characters, since my artistic strengths lie with drawing people. I'll come up with a character or two and construct a story and setting around them. This time around was tricky, however. No matter how many sketches I got out, I just couldn't quite think of a character that sparked that inspiration I was looking for. After flipping through some sketchbooks, I found some character designs that I really liked, and as a result, my cast is primarily recycled one-shot characters from various tabletop RPGs. I changed parts of their designs, personalities, and even backstories, but the point is, I started with an idea that got me excited and built off of that. This initial exciting idea can be anything. A character concept, a setting, even just a general story arc. As long as it incites that passion. Quick side note, if you've got a story you've been dreaming of bringing to life, I would advise that you save it for when you're more comfortable with your process and have further developed your skill set. The first time around is one big learning experience, and you're inevitably going to make mistakes, and you're going to learn new things that will improve your future endeavors. Bringing this idea to life is where the planning phase and materials come in. At first, you might think that you need really fancy paper, inking pens, and a scanner, and a printer, or a drawing tablet, an expensive art program, and oh god, what have I gotten myself into? Now, that's kinda right, but none of those are entirely necessary, at least not at first. When it comes to fleshing out your ideas, all you really need is a writing utensil and paper of any kind, or a simple notes app. The specific supplies you need during the actual production depends on the method of publication you opt for, but more on that later. If you're really on a budget, or just understandably don't want to spend a lot of money, there's this great video by Marsh Makes Comics that goes over a simple and easy way to make miniature comic books. It's pretty neat, and I think it's a good way to test the waters of sequential art. One suggestion that has been stressed like crazy is to absolutely plan your story in pages before you start illustrating. Most people will write a script or some kind of outline followed by sketching up rough thumbnails of the pages, or even doing both simultaneously. The beauty of this is that your script can be written however you please. You, or whoever is illustrating your story, just has to understand it and have a clear-ish idea of what's going on. I like to use Google Docs since it's cloud-based and I can write down ideas whenever inspiration strikes. Although, it might end up being that your various story notes are spread out among an egregious amount of note apps or notebooks. This is perfectly valid and I'm guilty of it too. The thumbnail sketches serve as the visual rough draft of your graphic novel. Having one allows you to see how your story will flow visually and help you plan your dialogue, panels, and pages accordingly. So, yeah, having a script and thumbnail sketches is super useful. It also means that when you inevitably change or even scrap some ideas, instead of having to toss out that beautiful 2-page spread you spent hours illustrating, you'll just have to make changes to your script or thumbnail panels. While this is all fun and great, sitting down and actually writing an entire story all the way through is probably impossible, or at the very least, mind-numbingly difficult. Or maybe I'm just big dum-dum. For like 3 straight weeks now, the only thing that's really been on my mind is my story. Or the lack thereof. I have character arcs and dynamics, and even some cool locations I'm developing, but as far as a general plot line, I've got nothing. That said, I have been working with what came to me the easiest. Going back to that initial nugget of wisdom, I've been trying to build off the ideas I do have that excite me. I may not know what the ending or even what the beginning of my story will be, but I do know how I want my characters to meet and how I want them to develop and grow. So I've been starting there and working out those details. To help me keep track of some of this stuff, I've been using a really neat website called World Anvil, where you can store all kinds of details and ideas for your story, from characters to places, even religions. It's a great tool for world building and neat if you don't want to physically write everything down. So moral of that little anecdote is that while you should try to plan out as much of your story as possible before actually diving into the production of your graphic novel, jumping around in your planning can just be another part of the process. And I think this serves as a good reminder that writing isn't linear. You can always go back and change things, move things around, add new elements, and scrap things that aren't necessary or don't fit. The same can be said about a story itself. You don't have to write your story chronologically if that isn't working for you. One of the biggest things holding me back was the fact that I had no idea how to start my story nor where I wanted to take it. I was utterly stumped, but I had to let myself just write, even if I didn't like what I was writing. What's important is just having something to work with and edit. Last things to keep in mind throughout this process is the kind of publishing method you want to use, and subsequently, the way you'll need to format the pages. From what I've gathered, there are two main categories of publication. The first is what I call the traditional way, where you end up with a physical copy, printed or the original work, of your graphic novel. There are a few ways to get here. You can do this by actually contacting a publishing company, working with an editor, all of that jazz. You could also pay for a printing service and self-publish. The other option is to go digital. The self-publishing route often results in having some kind of website or online store to sell your work, which is digital, but I'm talking about the likes of webcomics, something that is published online and meant to be read in that manner. This option is probably the easiest and most accessible, as well as the cheapest. Although this usually requires some kind of digital art component, think drawing tablet and art program. To cut down costs, I recommend Medibang Paint, which is a free drawing software that actually has a comics feature, though I haven't used that part of it yet. Also, there are inexpensive drawing tablets out there if you want to get into digital art. Mine was around $100, but there are plenty of secondhand ones available as well. Again, this isn't a necessity. You could very well publish your graphic novel online and still draw it traditionally, just by using a scanner. Now, back to publishing online. There are plenty of platforms out there that allow people to publish and share their work for free while still retaining ownership rights. Webtoon and Tapas are probably some of the most popular platforms. Another method I've seen, especially with artists who already have social media followings, is to post their comics on whatever social media site they occupy, like Instagram, Tumblr, or Twitter. Hell, you could even go as far as making your own website to host your graphic novel. Whichever route you opt to take will likely influence how you'll need to format your pages. While more traditional routes might call for the standard size paper broken up into panels, a webcomic platform typically utilizes a vertical format, which is optimal for scrolling. And artists who post their work on social media might opt for posting each panel as its own slide or image. But these are just the more widely used methods. There are many ways to experiment with formatting boundaries. For example, a popular format among comedic or slice-of-life webcomics is to arrange the panels in that of a coordinate plane, or, more palatable for anyone who does not wish to think about math, a game of Foursquare, which lends itself well to simple, relatable jokes or scenarios. So while whichever publishing option you choose can impact the format of your graphic novel, like in any creative field, there's room to play around and experiment. When I first got the idea of making a graphic novel, it seemed like a pipe dream. Something few individuals could successfully do. As more and more people are finding spaces to explore and share their creative passions and stories, the limits on what one can and can't accomplish are being pushed. Stories are the core of humanity. They're what tie us to our past, to each other, and what fill our futures with possibility. I have yet to accomplish my goal of making a graphic novel, but I've started to work towards it. The more time I spend on this project, the more it seems it could be a reality, and the less hesitant I've become. I suppose all I want to do is kindle the same flame of passion that was once lost in me, in others who may have lost it themselves, or never found it to begin with. So go create something you love. Go tell a story.